Commission, regular meeting for Monday, February 22nd, 2021. Virtual meeting viewing instructions. The public hearing meeting will be conducted this public meeting will be conducted exclusively as a virtual meeting in accordance with the Town Planning and Zoning Commission rules and regulations for the transaction of business and executive orders, number 7B and 7I, issued by Governor Ned Lamont. The public hearings and meetings will be broadcasted live on television at West Hartford Community Interactive Comcast Channel 5 and Frontier Channel 6098 and streamed live at www.whctv.org. Call to order at 7:06 p.m. Commission members present at this moment, Daly, Newton, Masunis, and we'll keep a roll call going for the meeting in the front half of this moving forward. Is everyone well?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for asking.
Yes. Yeah.
I figured I would ask. Old business, we've got one item on the agenda today, which is continued open discussion on strategy and issue identification for Conservation Environment Commission. I'll set the table here. This past year, our commissions adapted to the virtual environment, and to the extent members can see each other and police themselves tonight in terms of taking turns, responding on comments, etc. You're certainly welcome to do so without the formality of directing everything through the chair. I'll still help things along as needed. There's a lot of uncertainties abounding, and that's included our adaptation to the back half of last year to these virtual meetings. And so in the process, and I'm fully to blame for this, we really dragged out this process of identifying as a group how we make our commission function moving forward and what issues we tackle and how. And so with that, I hope everyone got to skim some summary material on sustainable CT I sent. I'll bring that up later. But not wanting to short circuit a conversation we had begun at last month's meeting, I felt that we should close that out first. And that would be the self-diagnostic exercise that Mr. Daly was leading us through so capably at the last meeting. So Sean, if you wouldn't mind, if you could take us through, I believe you have a recap of last meeting's conversation, a readout of what that conversation looked like. And if you want to use that to set the table for what prompts you may have for this meeting moving forward, please do feel free. For members' expectation setting purposes, I think we're going to go just about an hour tonight, but I don't expect to take up a 2-hour block of time. So with that, Sean, did you have thoughts that you wanted to add in?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, in fact, if it ends up just being the three of us tonight, this may be a much shorter meeting than we expected, but hopefully we'll have others joining us very soon. The one thing I think we could do is with the chairman and Mr. Newton on the call with us is I just thought I would kind of verbally here go over the bullet points of what I took from my notes from last meeting, where we discussed, there were two things that we discussed. We discussed kind of what's the current landscape, what is our perceptions of who we are as an organization, both, challenges, opportunities, and the like. And then we also had identified kind of what we would like the future of the commission to be, and what things we'd like to do. So I'll go over those two items, and then I'll reiterate as we get more people on the call tonight. But I think what I'd like to accomplish tonight is talking about how do we get from where our perceptions are of the current state to where we want to be in the future as an organization, primarily considering and talking about what may be some of the motivating factors and constraining factors helping us to motivate us to get to the future state and also preventing us from getting there. And then from there, talking about what are some specific action items that, taking into account what our current state is, what we want our future state to be, and taking into account the motivating and constraining factors, what action steps we could take this year and in the future in order to help us move from the current state to the future state. Any questions about that process? Okay, So, just to reiterate what I saw or what I took notes on from the current state was that a lot of the comments were around, obviously, how we work with and support the Zoning and Planning Committee. So there was a lot of unknown. Our current landscape was there were some unknowns on how and if we provide value to the Zoning and Planning Committee, and value to the general community for that matter, and how we provide that value. We agreed that we preview items that come before the Planning and Zoning Committee, but it's usually on a more reactionary basis than a proactive basis. And it seemed to be kind of our only accomplishment as far as our primary service that we provide. Recently, we did notice that in the current environment, we had not seen any applications from the Planning and Zoning Committee, so there hasn't been much work for us to do from a review process of what they're doing. And in fact, we recognize that I think it was both last year and I think even the previous year it was mentioned that the commission really only met half the time. There was talk, we did have conversation that kind of creates an identity crisis with our commission. There was talk about how we are not necessarily a subsection of the Planning and Zoning Committee. Let me see, I'm just reading through, I think I mentioned some of these. There was a lack of understanding of how requests are processed, what happens, as far as steps and procedures. And there was also talk about how there wasn't really any process to resolve disputes within the commission. In other words, a clear process on how we come to a decision as a commission. It was more seemed all opinion based. We did say that in the current state, we need to ID where the value is and what we're bringing to the West Hartford community. We also recognize that we have a very passionate team who wants to get involved. And we also recognize that our commission is a good place to brainstorm and discuss filtering process. And we also recognize that the average West Hartford citizen probably does not have an idea of what the Conservation and Environmental Commission does. So that's current state. Anything that you feel that I missed from our notes from last month's meeting?
I think you captured the notes and more, sir.
Okay. And so let's just briefly talk about kind of the future state. So, okay, great. That's the current landscape. We understand the challenges and opportunities. What would we like, the future state to be? We discussed how we would like to solicit more formal dialogue within the town as that pertains to the areas that we cover under conservation and environment. We also want the future state to be where we have a good understanding of our process and how things move, not only from CEC to planning and zoning, but how things move with how we form opinions and what we cover within our commission outside of planning and zoning. We also mentioned that we'd like to create a process to be able to communicate opinions, both a majority opinion and a minority opinion on items, and then have a clear process to identify items within the CEC's purview with a clear process as how to provide direction for the town. We also mentioned the future state. We'd look at the conservation environment issues for the town more holistically than, say, the clean energy environment or the recycling commission, some of the other commissions that are out there. And then also we had mentioned a piece about creating areas of research for our commission. Those were the items that I had for future state. Did anyone have any other items, or do you feel that that was captured most everything?
Do you want to start, Ted? Or? You went off mute, but I still can't hear you.
Yeah, I think you're on mute, Ted.
There we go. Hear me now? Sorry about that.
Good.
So yeah, first of all, thank you, Sean, for capturing these notes. I think they captured our conversation last month as best it can. I guess if I had any quibble with them, and it wouldn't be what you captured, but just the cadence in which you capture it, and not because of any fault of our own or your own, but I do feel like, for example, um, the the fourth bullet where we have a clear process, this being future state, to identify items within the CEC purview with a clear process to provide direction to the town. That captures it all in a nutshell, I think, which is we need to figure that out first before I think the other types of things would fall after we figure that out. So how do we have a more formal dialogue? How do we have the process for how things move from us to the Planning and Zoning Commission? How do we look at our conservation and environmental issues in a more holistic manner? How do we capture how do we make decisions first? And then if there is, in fact, an opportunity to identify minority and majority decision points, how do we do that? So it just seems like we've got that first nut to crack first. And then once we get comfortable with that, we can start putting more formality around how we tackle what our purview is.
Did you want to respond on that, Sean, before I talk?
No. I would say, yeah, I totally agree, Ted. And in fact, a lot of times in this exercise, we tend to do this, which is, to a certain extent, you're jumping right into what we want to do, which is, right, get to the action steps. All right, great, Sean. We talked about where we are. We're talking about where we're going. Let's get to, all right, how do we fix this, right? Mm-hmm. And I totally agree. And I agree that we definitely will get there. And I also agree with you that is probably the first item we want to tackle, because all of the other items fall underneath it, so to speak. So totally agree with you. I would just say that we will get there. I think the two things that we need to talk about first tonight is, right, and Mr. Chairman, I would look for your expertise in this area, which is, right, to talk about what is it that we can do, what is it that we may not be able to do, either because of some sort of bylaw, some sort of, it's covered under a different commission, so to speak. So I think once we have that in place, then I think we can move to the action steps. Mr. Chairman, it sounded like you had some comments as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So Ted had mentioned a quibble, and my only quibble is actually a little bit with the same turn of phrase that you had in provide direction for the town, when I would actually say that providing assistance to the town might be an even better role for the Conservation Environment Commission, in terms of, it's a highly professionalized town staff. They've got great goals when it comes to sustainability and securing the sanctity of Conservation and Environment Commission environment within the town. And so this commission, as an adjunct to that, like, what can it do that is supportive of town and town staff's objectives, but what they can't do alone through their own capacity, number one. And number two, what do we agree on that we want to do, right? And where do those two marry? And so that's kind of how I'm seeing a future state for the town, in an ideal sort of world here is, what are these objectives that the town needs more of a volunteer base for in its pursuit of achieving a greater degree of sustainability in the town, and how can this commission be of service to that? I'm always fascinated by this talk that we banter back and forth about dispute resolution process, because it really is interesting. Majority, minority opinion, etc. If we could get to a place where something like that isn't even needed, because this is more of like a task-oriented group that can be unified in tackling a finite and bounded objective that we agree on in advance, like this year, let's do this, right? Then I feel like that sort of thing might not necessarily be needed. So those were my immediate thoughts in reaction to the bullets that you had so kindly put together for all of us. Thank you. And welcome, Ms. Scott. Thanks, Emily, for joining.
Hi, Emily.
Yeah, no, so Sharon, totally agree there. So what I've done is, and I can, revise this, is kind of put two bullets in the future state. One where we help execute the town's directives, right, that pertain to the CEC. And at the same token, we also provide direction or guidance of where the town should head to in areas where where there are gaps with directives from the town. Does that sound correct?
It does. Thank you. And really where I was coming from with that is, it's not necessarily our job as volunteers, because anyone could be a volunteer, to be providing direction to the town when the town is run by elected officials that the people, all of us, are voting in, right? Like, no matter the composition of it, that is the proper body to be undertaking the direction of the town. But how can town citizens join in and either help steer through their elected officials or help lift in what I'm thinking here in terms of sustainability?
Well, and is it possible then that, one of the things that we provide as a future state is that the CEC becomes the, for lack of a better phrase, right, the sounding board for the town residents to come to when they do have ideas that concern conservation and environmental issues?
I would think an open door to be the default.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Emily, we just kind of went over, I emailed this document about a half hour before our meeting tonight, just where I provided some direction, notes from last month on what our discussion was as far as our perception of the current environment or the current state of the CEC and what we wanted the future state to be. So you may not have had a chance to look at it, but just wanted to know if there were any other thoughts that you wanted to have before we move to the kind of the second section.
No, I skimmed it coming up to speed, and thank you for circulating it, and apologies that I was late. Yeah, I think a priority for me would be having a formalized dialogue with the other stakeholders that we support or interact with, and in particular, TPZ, like, hi, these kind of inland wetland preview reports, how can we, is that a useful product? How could it be better? How could it be more efficient? And then, some of the other, as Matt was saying, how can we as volunteers, plug in best to the rest of the town's efforts? So I guess there's, I would advocate, sometime this spring convening a more like a dialogue with some of those other stakeholders.
Yeah, so, and this gets back to what I was just talking with Commissioner Newton about is, yeah, I agree. I think that is, as we get to tonight, the action steps that we want to take, I would be totally supportive of that, and I think that is right. I think kind of before we talk about action steps, right, and Mr. Chairman, maybe this is where you can provide some direction with the organization. I'd like to maybe have us talk about, I think motivating factors are a little bit obvious, but I don't want to presume. Obviously, like we mentioned in the current state, we obviously have a passionate group who wants to be involved. And so motivating factors are obviously wanting to make the town as best as we possibly can, create processes, right, that people can understand so they see how something can move from a general idea into actual execution of that idea. I was wondering, though, if maybe we could talk a little bit about any type of constraining factors that we have with the commission, such as, I think, Emily, to your point, right, with the Planning and Zoning Commission, do we have, what capabilities do we have? What capabilities don't we necessarily have, or is there anything?
Was that for Emily or for me?
It was for you, Mr. Chairman.
So you make me want to bring up our spot in town code and do a screen share, but I don't have that queued up right here. But that is where those powers are formalized, right? To your earlier point about motivations for joining, I do remember, I think we did a round robin on that at the last meeting on our motivations for being a part of the Conservation Environment Commission, what leads us to that sort of thing. I know that it's not to create a process, as you had suggested, to get from point A to point B, but the process being what gets one to the objective and to that motivating factor why they joined in the first place, right? So as to create that pathway to get to one's objective. Just my immediate thoughts on that. And in the meantime, as you poll others, I'm going to pull up that spot in ordinance to see if I can find that.
No, sure, thank you. So I know, Ted, Emily, you've been on this commission for certainly longer than I have. So one of the questions I would have for you is have you felt, are there constraining factors that you know of that we need to consider before we start talking about action steps, or we pretty much have carte blanche?
I'll go ahead and start. I don't know that we have any formal constraining factors other than what Matt might read from the the town ordinance for the commission. But I do feel like we may have some social constraining factors in the sense that if we being the commission and its members don't feel it's providing value, we may not have an effective body of volunteers to serve on the commission. So, so the constraining factor to me, the biggest one may be if we don't have a clear vision and goals that go along with that vision, then we're going to have people who maybe feel lack of motivation to serve on the commission, whether that's current members or people who are considering that in the future. So I think that's the biggest constraining factor in my mind, rather than the more formal ones that I think you're thinking about.
So I think you bring up a really good point, right? Which is we kind of have what the town directive is, and you can see that on the website. I'm not into creating a mission, vision, and value proposition just for the sake of creating one. But at the same token, I think you bring up a really valid point, right? Especially concerning the social factors and providing value. So one of the things I would ask is, should we think about, as far as this constraining factor, should we think about, as part of our future state, that we should have some sort of value proposition created that helps us to, as almost like a guideline, if you will, as to items that we'll look at versus items that we don't fall under purview, or is that getting too technical?
I don't know yet, I guess.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I don't know that
Sure.
we have to have a mission statement or something, but it seems like we just need to have a clear indication of purview. And that's what, in combination with what is on the website, it's what we feel we should be doing to add the most value to the community and worth the value of our time. We're going to spend 1 hour to 3 hours a month in service to the community. We want to make sure that it's valuable. And I think that it can only happen if we know what what we're charged to do. and whether that comes from the town or from ourselves and saying this is what we're going to do. So we're gonna focus on conservation efforts, and we're going to use Sustainable Connecticut's guidelines as our approach, and we're going to do this or do that or not do this or not do that. Might be really helpful.
With permission, I've just begun sharing the screen. Can folks see it?
It
For a
says
bit,
you're
but
about
it
to start to. It hasn't come up yet.
Yeah, it's Matt is starting to share content.
I guess I am.
And Emily, I did get on the chat here from I think it didn't totally do the first one, but
It's truncated. I'm looking at the municipal code section 25-14A, the duties of the Conservation and Environment Commission.
And I just pulled up the same.
Yeah.
It's probably not showing it yet.
It is not.
That is starting.
So I can send you, if it's easier, I can send you guys like the link instead of the text, which unfortunately was truncated a bit.
there we go.
There we go.
See it?
Yep.
Oh, it popped up?
Yep.
Good. So establishment purpose, a joint Conservation Environment Commission composed of a total of 11 members. We do have some vacancies. And there are members not present right now, but still there are currently 8. Is hereby established for the purpose of developing and conserving natural resources and protecting the integrity of the environment within the territorial limits of the town. We all know that by heart. I know we all recite that when we wake up. But I just wanted to say that to table set right here. And then Emily, you had indicated 14A. Is that what you had posted?
Yeah. So exactly, Matt, where your cursor is hovering now.
Yep.
That I don't see a utility in drafting any kind of separate mission statement when like this is our guiding star, and if we don't know what this means, then we should talk about that. So like, for example, shall conduct research into the utilization and possible utilization of land areas of the town. So I think, there are a lot of possible activities that would potentially fit under that umbrella if any particular task like grabbed us, and made us want to pursue that. And I think may coordinate the activities of unofficial bodies organized for similar purposes. We can talk about what that might mean.
That's pretty broad.
Yeah, pretty broad.
The thing is that a lot of these are very, very broad, which is a good thing. Mm-hmm. But to that point, it can create confusion because then, you don't create, and I think that's is say, okay, this helps give us a broad scope of what we can do.
Right.
And then as we move into the action steps, what is it that we want to do based on a prioritization of how we get from our current state to our future state? Does that make sense?
It does. And one thing I would point out is anyone who's read code, legislation, anything like that knows the importance of shalls and mays. So shall, there are several of those. Number 1 and number 4 seem to be the land use related ones where perhaps that informed why we were junctioned and are junctioned closely with town planning and zoning, right? Because they have such oversight over land use. I see a few more shalls here in section B, which is just as expansive. Again, probably what you want here. You want expansive permissiveness when it comes to how things are written, so it's not too prescriptive, unless you're talking about a shall that is way too much for you. So in this case, shall investigate pollution problems within the town, alleged violations of clean air and clean water standards, recommend to the town council procedures, ordinances, rules, interlocal agreements to abate and prevent such problems. Another shall, number 2, conduct such surveys as shall be required, determine the source and nature of pollution hazards, review state, local, metropolitan, district, air and water effluent records. I hope you've been reviewing the effluent records, Mr. Daly. And conduct public hearings for the purpose of obtaining information leading to the abatement of pollution. And number 3, shall keep records of such surveys, inspections, and hearings. This is highly technical stuff when it comes to the requirements underneath these shalls, right? Surveys, potential engineering surveys. Again, probably speaking to why we were junctioned to town planning and zoning as overseers of land use. And then, of course, we go down here, the very nature of pollution, as it's referred to above, is defined right here most expansively. I'd say, which is what I tend to enjoy reciting to the members here, which is that we could, if we desired, be part of the junked automobiles or control of rodents club. And so,
Yeah.
you know, it's the members' prerogative.
Right. And to that point, you know, I guess candidly, I was perfectly happy serving as the warm-up band for TPZ, if indeed that is a useful endeavor. But, you know, Sean, if there's some particular issue that grips you, you know.
Well, let me talk to that for a second.
Pardon?
I feel like, let me talk to that for a second. I feel like that could be still a continued and useful function, as we've heard informally that those things can be helpful for TPZ. My concern with that is doing it during the virtual environment when we're still dependent on this. Now, we don't know how we're going to come out of stay at home in the pandemic, but it is an easier undertaking when we meet in person reliably 1 week before planning and zoning meets, right? Because that way it can be a pre-review right there. If it comes down to, let's say we don't find quorum and that means an applicant has to go before planning and zoning in another month, you are holding up a person's business or a business's business as a result of that, if we're acquired part of the process right there. So that's my only misgiving right there. And so I would want to make sure that we're well situated to fulfill that function if we are filling that function. We've got a little bit of static that went away. Okay. So that's all. That was my point on that.
Yeah, and I think that would be part of the dialogue with the other process.
So we can move into the kind of the action step piece. The one thing I'd mention, Emily, that is there's two ways of thought, right? If I hear you correctly, it sounded like you're saying it seemed like we really, and tell me if I've misheard you, we really should simply be the preview, right, of the Zoning and Planning Commission, looking at things that come before them, applications that come before them. I would say, as I read these items, our purview and our directive is much larger than that. Tell me if you...
I did not say like that's all we should be. I said, that was fine. And like, if I don't have any particular like source of pollution, let's say, that I feel compelled to bring to this group and have them investigate. But if you do, then like, let's hear it and let's explore that issue. So I think it's more like while we are, so I think like there's only so much fishing around for purpose we can do in a vacuum. I think we have, as a commission, have a mandate that we certainly can take up these issues were they to come to pass. So like, for example, if there was a neighborhood that was complaining vociferously about runoff, like I'm not aware of this happening here specifically, but like there's a lot of case law about like new developments changing stormwater patterns and like flooding out the neighbors, and it's a big problem, right? So for example, if that was something that was happening here, may or may not be, I don't know, that's the sort of thing that we could take upon ourselves to like try to help that situation somehow. And so if you, Sean, or you, Matt, or you, Ted, or whoever else is aware of or gripped by some particular issue that you'd like to kind of bring to the commission and get like leverage the commission's manpower or whatever behind that issue, like that's great. It could be organics recycling. It could be like we had that conversation about rats, or whatever. So I guess my point is that's what we were doing. And we have an opportunity, in the ordinances to take on, special projects or whatever, if we want to, I guess. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing. Like, to your point, Matt, there's probably limited utility to an examination of the kind of wetlands pre-review thing now, because we've sort of been in a different posture during this period. And so maybe as this all starts to thaw and we come out the other side, there are probably conversations that would be more productive at that point rather than at this point when it's all still so uncertain. But in the meantime, like, we've got a broad mandate. Like, if there are particular issues that any particular member thinks we should take on as special projects, like, let's hear it. That just has not been the case when I've been involved.
Can I?
So, go ahead.
I was about to ask if I could parlay that into talking about sustainable CT, because it seems to relate, and really only because I'm still screen sharing and I could simply move to another tab right now, but I know it took a minute to load up last time. So that's why the only reason I'm interjecting that at this point, but I don't want to interrupt any other thoughts.
No. And if you want to do that, well, the one thing there was a question I wanted to ask, which is, do we think right now that a member of the general public who has a pollution issue knows to come to this commission?
Ted, you're muted.
Answer: no, I don't think so, Sean. That's a good question, and it's one I don't know that we have, as a commission, really contemplated before, which is, should we publicize the commission's existence and ask for feedback from the community, whether it's general feedback, a pollution or water-specific issue. I like that idea. I think it really helps because it's something where a citizen could approach the commission and not feel like they're approaching the town. And there's some risk, I think, in approaching the town in some cases, and or a business might want to approach the commission without having to approach the town and have to worry about what ramifications there might be. I guess the concern I have about, and switching gears a little bit with Emily's suggestion about, if an individual has a thing, individual commission member has a particular interest in something, we can kind of put the commission's weight behind that. I'm a little concerned about that, not because I don't think it's a good idea for people to kind of be passionate about something and then kind of follow through on it. I just feel like that might be difficult to manage, difficult for the commission to agree on, because we are a body instead of a group of individuals. And it could be that, somebody's very passionate about something and the commission gets all excited about it. And, for 3 months, that person does something and then they disappear because they're not making enough progress on it. And then what was started isn't going to be finished because the passionate person has left. So I guess I'm looking at just a little concerned about maybe an individual thing where, it's kind of commissioner initiated versus commission initiated. And so I don't know, maybe we look at things like, well, Emily, yeah, let's continue if we are effective to do the preview for planning and zoning on the water issues, because I think that gave us a mission and something that we all rallied around, and I think we asked good questions, and we helped prepare the applicant for going to planning and zoning, and that probably was a value to everybody involved. But if we were to take Sean's idea too, to say, well, let's let people in the town know that if they have a conservation or pollution related issue, that's well within our purview, and we'd be happy to kind of consider that as a commission, then we aren't relying on individual commission members. It's brought to us, we decide as a group whether it's something that we can help with or not, and if so, what the course of action ought to be.
So to that point, I did want to talk about action steps, or we're going to go over the hour. One of the things that I kept hearing about the future state is that we want to better understand how we support and how we work with planning and zoning. So one action step suggestion could be, and this is one of the things I want to mention, tonight for action steps, I don't think we necessarily need to talk about individual actions, but more high level of what we want to do, and then look at each action step and what we do underneath it later on during the year. And I'll explain that in a minute. So, for example, one action step might be having a meeting, either the chairperson or the entire commission, meeting with planning and zoning to establish an understanding of when the CEC is leveraged and what the criteria is used to do so. Emily, I'm getting thumbs up. Mr. Chairman?
I think that's I've been curious about that. I think that's a productive exercise. It may not be productive like in March when things are still firmly in, like that might be a medium term action item.
We absolutely can establish when we're going to do that, but at least as far as an action step, I think that makes sense. The second action item, so, we solicit, when we looked at the future state, I think that takes care of the bullet of we have a good understanding and process of how things move from CEC to planning. One of the bullet points was we solicit more formal dialogue within the town. So Commissioner Newton, and like I had suggested before, right, it might be one of the action steps is we're going to look at a more formal communication program for the town to be able to leverage the CEC better. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Newton, what are your thoughts?
I think there absolutely could and should be a communication program for residents to know about CEC so that it could be leveraged. The question is, it's so open-ended right now that it's like, I feel like we've got to zero in on exactly what it is we would be communicating out that we do. Otherwise, we're a volunteer body that's so expansive that it can't seem to get the inertia toward any one goal because there's so many possible goals. Someone could bring us an issue and I could go off on a tangent, but that's my immediate thinking on it.
One thing, Mr. Chairman, is that clearly research is under our purview. So if somebody brings to us an issue, it doesn't mean that we would take any action on that per se, but we might assist that person in finding the right place to go or the right resources in which to address that issue. So it takes advantage of the passion that we have, the knowledge that many commission members have, and professional experience, and can direct that person into the proper next step. And it might be to go visit the town, or it might be to go to sustainable CT, or it might be something that the commission itself would like to put some effort behind.
Right. Until that's better defined, my thinking on that at the moment is if someone approaches the town with XYZ issue, I don't know what it is, they'll probably get some form of help. Say, go talk to the staffer over here in this department or over there. They know what they're doing. If they approach us, it's a volunteer body. It's right now almost the equivalent of saying, talk to your neighbor. And so, like, what's your neighbor going to do with your problem versus the town, right? So there's a certain trade-off right there. At the same time, that being the counterpoint to your good thoughts earlier, Ted, which was that maybe there is legitimate reasons why they would want to preview something for other citizens before going to the town first, right?
Well, and I think, Mr. Chairman, to Ted's point too, right? As a constraining factor, there's a constraining factor right there, which is, right, are we just simply viewed as a volunteer organization that has no teeth is not the right word, right? But to Commissioner Newton's point, I think it's, I think it should be, right? If you have a citizen of the town who comes to the CEC and the CEC says, yes, you're right, there's an issue here. We need to get the town involved. I think that's a much more powerful potential tool than just an individual citizen going directly to somebody in the town and trying to figure out who within the town they need to talk to in order to make something happen. I think it's a much more sustainable process.
Well, again, it depends on the mechanics of the commission itself, and if they're set up to be that sustainable process for others, irregardless of what issue gets brought to them. And if they've got wherewithal in one area, but we might have no idea on another set of issues that get brought to us. Again, while I'm taking the chair's prerogative right here, I'm still screen sharing the same exact screen as before because it took a minute to load last time. I am now switching over to tell the group about sustainable CT at the chair's prerogative. So, as I had mentioned earlier, this solves some of our issues for us. Potentially when it comes to issue identification and what should we do. This is, I'm going to read it off here because I don't know how large the text communicates onto the screen here. Sustainable CT communities try to be here. The mission of Sustainable CT is to provide municipalities with a menu of coordinated voluntary actions to continually become more sustainable, to provide resources and tools to assist municipalities in implementing sustainability actions and advancing their programs for the benefit of all residents, and to certify and recognize municipalities for their ongoing sustainability achievements. I'll read just one more here in the overview. Sustainable CT is a voluntary certification program to recognize thriving, resilient Connecticut municipalities. An independently funded grassroots municipal effort, Sustainable CT provides a wide-ranging menu of best practices. Municipalities choose sustainable CT actions, implement them, and earn points toward certification. I know personally, deviating here for a second, that West Hartford has pursued this in the past. They've won a bronze award, I believe, in certification, and that was before Sustainable CT even had a gold award to go to. And so there are these increasing benchmarks over time, and towns do compete for sustainability bona fides on this. So they provide opportunities for grant funding, importantly, to help communities promote economic well-being and enhance equity, all while respecting the finite capacity of the natural environment. It's designed to support all Connecticut municipalities, regardless of size, geography, or resources, and empowers them to create high collective impact for current and future residents. And then just one more here, not digging down on any of these items, but just previewing that there are quite a range of them available to municipal town staff or volunteers who want to do something for the town. And this is a rabbit hole here. Any one of these could be clicked on for far more information about what this entails and develop a municipal energy plan, for example. We heard a presentation from the Clean Energy Commission on their municipal energy plan, something they devoted a lot of time and energy into. And that's just one item of so many others here within this overall rubric of sustainability. With that, I'll stop sharing my screen, but you get the idea here. I feel like this is a statewide program that already has a broad-based reach and communicative ability and ability to shore up volunteer support into a coordinating body like this one to help the town in achieving its sustainability objectives, where town staff may or may not have the wherewithal or the time or the ability to do that without a little bit of support. And so to the extent that I think a group like ours can, in the future, identify an issue of interest to us and coalesce behind it, I think that that might be one or perhaps the best route forward in terms of what does this commission's core action strategy look like when it comes to self-identified issues. So those are my thoughts. Thank you for bearing with me.
What if we, Mr. Chairman, had as an action step to understand, for this year, an action step for the commission to gain a better understanding of sustainable CT and work to select items that can achieve better sustainability for the town, based on, and I'm free forming here, so but based on the guidance of sustainability CT.
Beautifully put.
You're
I like
on
that so
mute.
far.
Recognize that before you told me. My finger wasn't fast enough, but I would even add to that,
No
though,
worries.
in conjunction or in consultation with the town, because I believe that when the town achieved the bronze status, it was through a town staff effort as opposed to a commission effort.
Yes.
And I would imagine, even if a silver or a gold level effort isn't something that they are actively pursuing, they are probably pursuing aspects of sustainable CT right now. And so I wouldn't want to approach this kind of independent of the town, because one, we want to make sure that we know what they're doing, if anything, that might be helpful. And two, where do they think that we might be able to provide the greatest value, because they don't have the professional staff or the time to address something in one of these particular categories.
Would it help if for next month's meeting we invited on a representative from the town and or perhaps a representative from Sustainable CT to talk further about that exact status, so we could get a sense of that?
Yeah, I guess I would vote for the town person. Would the sustainable CT person know what the town's efforts are, if they're being
The town would know
pursued?
best.
Yeah. Is there a particular person in mind, Matt, that you're thinking of? Or a particular position, maybe I should say?
I've had dialogue before with the town's energy manager, Catherine Davini, and she has actually offered to us to give a talk about sustainable CT in the past. However, those were during months when we had a loaded calendar to begin with in terms of presentations, and so that wouldn't have worked on agendas during those, or we had schedule conflicts. So for that reason, before inviting her on to address the commission, I wanted to dialogue with the group first about sustainable CT to begin with, so that we can get that sense of things first and ascertain, okay, yes, let's learn more from what the town's up to now. Any concerns?
No concerns. So what I have here, and I think they're pretty good for initially here for this year, the three main action steps I have is for our commission to have a meeting with planning and zoning to establish an understanding of when the CEC is leveraged and how the process works between the relationship between the CEC and planning and zoning. Second action step I have is to establish a communication program for town residents to understand what we do and how we can be leveraged for items that fall under our purview. And then the third would be, as we mentioned, understanding sustainable CT and working to select items that we can achieve for better sustainability within the town and in consultation with the town. Do those sound like, does that sound correct?
Perfectly taken down. Is there a sequencing to that? Because my assumption would be the nearest term one being understand sustainable CT, if that's going to be a function of this commission. Meeting with planning and zoning, yes. Intermediate term, I think, is Emily identified, because the virtual environment makes things a little weird right now in terms of the mechanics of commission referrals and things like that. And a communication program for town residents on what we do would seem to be subordinate to figuring out what we do, since we're still in that process. Is that right?
Yeah,
And
so in
that
other
would
words,
be
if
the
we were to
longer-
prioritize, one would be the sustainable CT, two would be the planning and zoning, and then three would be establishing a communication program.
I think so.
Yes.
And don't let me misstate from before in terms of who we invite on from the town. We'll discuss it. I know that Catherine Davini has been involved with that. John Phillips, the Public Works Coordinator. I'm sure Matt Hart, the Town Manager. Sherry Cantor, the Mayor. There's got to be, a whole slew of people across town who are involved in this. And so we'll figure out who the right person to pep up the commission will be.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think those are, again, it's not too many action steps. It's not too few, but it certainly provides some additional direction on who we are, what we want to do, and how we want to do it.
8 o'clock exactly. Technically 5 minutes early since we started at 7:05. So we're actually
Good.
setting new records for ourselves here. This is excellent. Is there anything else that folks want to impromptu add to the agenda here? Subject to me cutting them off if I decide that it's going to take another hour.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would add is that, one thing we should keep in mind is that the action step, I'll put more formal document together, but as we consider these action steps, we should, and I'll make sure it's part of the document, that there's an understanding this is a living, breathing document, and we can and will make changes where necessary based on the town's priorities.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir, and thank you all. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Well, Matt, just one question.
Absolutely.
Do we have a quorum since?
Just going to ask that.
Yeah.
Four of 8.
Is that a quorum or not?
I believe it's not 50% plus one, unless you count West Hartford Community Television.
Okay. I was hoping we could, but I guess not.
Well, we could still memorialize plans for our own benefit here. And I think that'll...
Well, what we could do, Mr. Chairman, again, I could put this together, and then if next month we do have a quorum, we could bring it there for a more formal vote.
Certainly.
Sounds good.
That works.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time.
All right. Thanks again.
Great job.
Bye-bye now.
Okay.
Have a great evening.